you can sit back and have a bit of a listen. I'm going to go off on a rant for a while on this subject matter. I want to talk about leadership. And I have the slides. Let me get out of the way. I mean, geez, a big enough head without having to look at it all the time. Anyway, here we are. I'm diminished. I'm put back in my box. It's the left hand side corner of the screen. Oh, God. I might as well laugh at myself because I can tell you everyone else does. It's a great quality to have, to be honest with you, to be able to stand back and laugh at yourself. Uh, Jesus, I'm ranting. It must be the medication I'm on. Anyway, where am I? Oh, yes, yes, leadership. Enlarge the PowerPoint, so we see. Um, I'm going to take it. There was a PowerPoint, there is still a PowerPoint presentation up there on your Moodle site about leadership. It's probably I renamed them to all leadership. And I really, I look back and I said, oh Jesus, what a drudge! Imagine putting the students through that again this year. So I said, right, let's change it a little bit. Let me get out of the classroom thinking and say this is the theory for that and this is the theory for that. Blah 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 blah, feck and blah. So I said I'd get out of that sort of mode and try and put some context and some reality around a lot of this stuff because, much and all as I would be an educator, I'd be failing if I didn't educate you from what I know and from what my colleagues know in the real world, above and beyond the bloody textbooks and the PowerPoints and the journals and the articles and all that. So that's why I said I'd have a rethink about this and look back and dug out some of my material that's better. It's not so much a couple of years old because, as you can see from the title here, it clearly says, just by way of checking, can you all see that clearly?
Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. Happy days, Maddie Hayes. And and as you can see, it's, as I say, leadership, different yet common perspectives, and what we look at and how we define leadership and so on. And the kind of I won't say the heavier stuff, the deeper thinking stuff comes towards the latter end of this video as such. And then we look at what we know to be the top skills. Now, interestingly, there are two pie charts inside here, one about two-thirds of the way and one towards the very end, and they're almost identical, which kind of confirms to me that, well, what I already know, but generally speaking, perceptions, understandings, and viewpoints and opinions don't really differ over the ages. And we all look for these characteristics in leadership. So let me just take in a little bit of a journey. So you'll hear all these things. What's leadership? The art of creating greatness in other people's. Wow, Jesus, is it an art form? Is it a science? What the hell is it? It's a mixture of everything, actually. It's an all-roundedness in our personalities and our traits. Some of us might have some more attributes stronger than others, and so on. The important thing is that we get to know what these attributes are and find what our weaknesses are. And by way of and I would have mentioned this to you before, that anytime I took on a role inside an organization over the years, I always set out to make myself redundant. I say, are you some kind of a whack job, Mark? Why would you make yourself redundant? And really what I was saying is that I wanted to get the job to such a state that it became invisible, almost transparent, that there wasn't a need for that physical person to be in place, that other people could assimilate bits and pieces of it, and the organization or the team starts to get its own momentum and going, and then I'd move on to something else and so on. And a couple of my managers said I was a real pain in the butt for that, that we're after creating this, and we have this role and you took on that, and now what are we going to do with you? It wasn't as cut and dry as that, but generally speaking, it was my fun time, I suppose. And so yeah, it's putting a lot of times putting others ahead of yourself, and that can be difficult to do, and because of all the pressures and that we have in day-to-day living and so on and so forth. But nevertheless, it is a mixture of understandings, science, and then pulling it all together, and how you pull that together, that takes skill, art, so to speak, And here's an interesting infographic when breaking through persistent barriers to leadership. So people would have been surveyed around the world and in employment and so on in different organizations and asked what did they see, what kind of issues did they think. And it's interesting to look up here, people who think that these issues are barriers, for example, to equal leadership opportunity. And you have religious beliefs, gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, disability. And people see these as, whether they're real or not can be questionable. And oftentimes you'd have to ask yourself, am I putting these up as a reason why I'm not succeeding in a leadership role, or I'm not getting promoted, and so on? And we like to try and blame or excuse ourselves by using some of these reasons. But nevertheless, the reality of it is, however, how to say, important they might be to you as an individual, from a collective here, they clearly are issues. There are clearly people and perceptions. A lot of the, you see, this is the most dreaded word in the English language, is perception. Because where do we draw the line between perception and reality? We might perceive something to be the case. I mean, God knows you would have been exposed to all this stuff with Trump and all that, and it would have created perceptions of how much of a flake he was. The reality was really close to perception in that case. But you see, but even more sinister is, things being blurted out on Facebook, for example, or Instagram, Discord, whatever platform you're using, and without, as we say in business, due diligence, without having checked the facts. And one thing to be careful of, there are always two sides to every story. And that's why I'm a stickler for looking for data. Show me the money, Jerry Maguire. Show me the data, and let me make my own decision, rather than being enforced because 10 people or 20,000 people liked the comment. Oh, that must be true. Not necessarily so, because we do you know how I actually used to describe it? It was like a nuclear mushroom cloud. You have an explosion, then you have all these, what do they call them? Is a pyroblasts, I think, is these explosions within explosions and so on. And by the time you're up at the stratospheres of explosions, and it still forms its own little clouds within clouds, and so on, we've lost sight of the actual physical bomb that exploded on the ground or close to the ground level that roughened these other things. And that's really what happens with, in so many facets of life and work and study and research and so on. We go off on these tangents, but the real trick is trying to trace back to the root of all this and see why we've ended up in this part of the cloud, or why we've ended up over there in that part of the cloud, and so on, that we can see. Or if you liken it to a tree outside there, you've the leaves way off over there and the roots somewhere down here, but there are linkages, and that's important to be able to get back through the trunk down to the root cause, or the root data, and so on. And that's really important, because I'm going to be killed for saying this. We were doing this, AIT have all these equality, diversity, inclusion things going on. And we had a questionnaire sent out last week to staff, or the week before last, I can't remember, and asking about our opinions and this, that, and the other thing, and a standard survey. And it came to the gender part of it, and it went down, male, female, non-binary, don't want to say. I looked at that, for Jesus sake. So I put in hexadecimal. I said, let's really confuse it all together, But yeah, and I'm trying to be as practical as possible, and I say, equality, diversity, and inclusion. And I say, all of these different entities, groups, and cultures, subsets of society, and so on and so forth, the diversity side of it, and then propagating, oh, we are this, we are that, we're the other thing, and being in some cases some more vocal or active than others. And then we want to have inclusion, but we want to be included as well. So why put in all this effort to be different and to be equally the same? I don't know, maybe there's something crazy about my logic, but as I said, I strip it down to two simple things. You're male, you're female. You're a person, you communicate, that's all I need to know. Don't need to know anything else. That's how I reduce the complexities of interacting with people. And if you have something interesting to say, contribute, I'll listen. If you want something, information, I'll share, and so on. Keep it simple and move on and move on. But again, it's this society we're living in. These mean a lot to different people and different groups, and as you can see there, ethnicity and so. And then communications gap is growing. I just need to put my glass on to see precisely what they're written here, because it is quite small text actually. They say communication effectively, 71% is important to great leadership, and then 31% say leaders overall are communicating effectively, 8 out of 10 or above. So it's interesting. Absolutely. And I'm surprised it's not a little bit higher, to be honest with you, that the 71% isn't higher, because that's the fundamental to effective leadership. Clear, open, articulate communication. And that coming, no matter what kind of leadership role you have in an organization. We're not talking about, presidents of countries and CEOs of large organizations. This can just be a small team of people, such as yourselves. And for example, I mean, we will test this. I might put some, I won't say constraints, but some info to each of the team leaders, and you have to bring that back and maybe discuss it or review it and see how it's impacting your particular project. And is that being communicated clearly, or does the leader come back and say, he said something about this, but I'm not sure what he's talking about? So the point would be that you have to be clear in your own mind, such that you internalize it, that it makes sense to you. And you will have that eureka moment. Say, now I know what he's on about. Jesus, couldn't he have said it this way, that way? But now you're saying, I make sense of it, so I can say it this way to the team, or I can say it that way, or whatever. And that's important. This whole aspect of communication. Unfortunately, that gets interfered with with biases. Now there's about 250, maybe more, known biases. I don't even want to get into this realm of unconscious bias. For crying out loud, Jesus! Next to be saying that I'm giving lectures while I'm sleeping. Then I'm not conscious at all. Some people might even say, "Are you even conscious?" Anyway, unconscious bias. I don't, because how can they be impacting your actual judgment in the instance that you're making the judgment if they're unconscious? Some say, oh, they're so far back in your mind, they're inferent. That's just bullshit way of saying that, there might be something else going on, and so on and so forth. You will have biases. We all have biases. The important thing is to know what they are and how we can remove them from our communications, such that they don't cloud our decisions or cloud our understandings or interfere with us trying to assimilate information or knowledge and get to the root cause of a particular problem. That's really important. So knowing your biases and knowing what they are and so on. Just get this cable out of my way. Knowing what they are is quite important. As for the this earned trumps paid, I suppose, nothing got to do with the Donald the Duck. Anyway, which channels have the greatest impact? So interestingly, again, if you look here, we said, from a leader's perspective, in-person speeches and appearances, 56%. Equal power, you have formal announcements and news releases. Then it starts to drop down to TVs, then down to websites, down to official company announcements, reports, and all that sort of stuff, all the way down to newspapers as such. Print advertising. But if we go back up to the scale, up to here in terms of the communication, and so probably the main reason why we have a tendency there is because we can physically see the person. And this is the whole thing about communication. There's so much that a leader exudes by just the way they look, speak, the gestures they make, the tone of their voice, and so on. There's so much we pick up, over 80%. Some people are even talking now 95% of our communication is non-verbal communication. And you will pick up on these, and you can train till the cows come home, on how, you watch the different nuances, and I mean, some of the traditions where, if you're looking down to the left, oh, he's lying, or if you're looking down to the right, he's hiding something. They're all wrong. They're absolutely all wrong, because God knows I do it all the time. It's looking down, and am I lying? Of course not. And am I hiding something? No, absolutely not. It's a lot of people would use eye movement or rapid eye movement because they're thinking ahead, and they're literally they're searching their brains. Where will I find? I'm looking for and the next point I'm making. So I mean, our brains work at a phenomenal speed, and we're constant. So sometimes this manifests itself in physiological type of reactions, such as eye movement or head movement, and anxiousness and so on. And I was watching a sequence of videos of CIA and FBI kind of investigators are looking at traits in people and so on, doing investigations. What are the tell signs? If somebody's covering up something and so on and so forth. And even within themselves, there were contradictory messages coming out of the videos, and but yet, now in one instance, they were interviewing a lady, and she was, sitting there, legs crossed, and was she complicit in some kind of audit cover-up in an accountancy firm, and going through it, and basically the question was she guilty or not? And I pretty much came to the conclusion that she was guilty, all right, and it was obvious. But the real fun I had in this case was, how did I know? I was looking at the various tells. Was there something else I was missing? And there were a few bits of how they respond to certain things in a couple of seconds, and the investigators waiting 5 seconds before they ask the next question to not to let the candidate ramble on about stuff and all this sort of stuff. So it was interesting to see some of those aspects. But what I found remarkable was, you could pick up the vibes, so to speak, from somebody. Now, again, this is all coming down to why, and that's why we look at great orators like Obama and so on, and these guys, because of their presence, they have this charisma about it, to use a word, that draws us in, and we actually, the more we're drawn in, the more we listen to each of the words they're actually saying. And it makes more and more sense to us, and there's no more ambiguity. And when that's happening amongst many individuals, then that's where the should say the word is not right, popularity, or the consensus of everyone say, yeah, he's good. And then we start to talk about it, because we do have that feel good factor, because we believe what they're saying, and they're really good at convincing us of what they're saying, and we permeate that out, and that's how we begin to snowball up and say, he's a great leader, or he's a great president, and he's a great team leader, and he's or she, whatever the case must be. Better watch the equality here, Mark. But in any case, these are the kind of things you would look for. Now, I'm not going to talk about this anymore on this particular PowerPoint, because I have another one later on. But just note, you have motivation, social, and emotional capacity, and ethics, learning orientation, cognitive capacity, and drive. And that was about 2015, 2016, maybe a bit later, when that was compiled as leadership potential factors. Note the word, and that's the only difference. One of the differences is potential factors. So characteristics or traits. Now, again, here's how you have this intersection between this the skills of leadership, their abilities, and the implies here. So what implies needs, it's like another version of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but this is in a professional context. And basics, you want to be respected, you want to learn and grow, you want to be an insider, being included. You want to do meaningful work, stuff that you get enjoyment out of and that has value to you, not just monetarily, but also motivationally and professionally. In other words, advancing your career. And then we all want to be part of something bigger, which is essentially this winning team. So what do we require from leaders in these cases? Now, down at this, you have to build a trust. That's for you to be respected, or from your perspective, you have to be able to trust the leader, but the leader must also be able to trust you. Okay, so it's a two-way street. I wouldn't just use the arrow here in one direction. And here you talk about, learning to grow, how the leader can support, coach, mentor, whatever skills are necessary to enable you to grow. And that's one of the biggest, I say one of the more important parts of leadership function in an organization is that I see them as the plow, so to speak, the snow plow. They clear the way for you as the traffic to be able to keep going on the road. The better they clear the road, the faster you can go, and so on. And not to be, look at me, I'm the leader, I'm the boss, I'm the manager, I'm out front, everyone follow me, behind me, so kind of thing. That's not, you clear it out. You could be done in the middle of the night and have the roads clear for tomorrow morning in the background, and the cars can come along and they wouldn't even see you. That's a real leader. That's real leadership skills. That's why I talk about putting others first as opposed to yourselves. And one obvious question might be that, well, if you do that, Mark, how does your boss know that you're doing a good job if your team are functioning without you? Because they're in their job, because they're smart enough to recognize they have got good people leading the team, so they know that the less they see of you and the more they see of the team performing, then you're doing your job. Do you follow me? It was a great trick of what's his name, Jack Welch, when he was president of GE. I think I might have mentioned this before. In head office, you had the various vice presidents of the different businesses and different industries that they were in, all reporting into Jack Welch, and they'd have their admin staff working for them as well, and all that sort of stuff. And the companies that they oftentimes they were vice presidents of could be scattered anywhere across the states or indeed abroad, because I mean, GE is huge and it's in many different industries, to say the least. And one of the ways Jack Welch used to evaluate his vice presidents' performances and behaviors and so on, he'd casually talk to their admin staff in the head office, and oftentimes he'd look, well, how many phone calls were coming in into such and such vice president, and how many calls were going out from that president's phone, so to speak. And he very simply said, well, if there are more calls going out, well, this guy isn't doing his job, because what he's doing is controlling, and he's interfering and so on. And if there are more calls coming in, this guy essentially is doing his job, because he's only interfering or controlling or helping when needed, that the function. And some people say, but if I'm not getting any calls coming in, your organization is functioning. What's to worry about? You don't need to be making calls just to show you exist, and so on. And it was a very clever way and simple way of evaluating performances as such inside his organization. So if you go up here and building teams and being inclusive, including people. So no one knows everything. God knows I know that. And you have to surround yourself with people who have the relevant information, knowledge, and so on. And oftentimes, in one particular role I had in a department manager in Germany, the guys were working for quite technical projects. I think I told you this before anyway. First, GSM, digital mobile phones, were building that system. And there were guys in the department and indeed on my team who were far more knowledgeable than myself. Did I feel threatened? Not in the least. I was a little bit older. Obviously, I was in my Jesus, how old was I? I was in my 30s, early 30s. I didn't really feel threatened. And the reason being was that it was a role I had to do. I just had to make sure that the guys were pulling together and that they had what they needed as such. Some of them were really technically advanced and brilliant people. And there was no way could I match their brain power in that particular level of expertise in a particular area as such. But I knew if I could harness theirs and I could keep them focused and so on and so forth, the overall goal we'd achieve. But that takes, some people say, well, you have to be better. Working with the Germans themselves, actually, that can be a bit of a challenge. That's why kind of cultural and ethnicity comes in and all that sort of stuff, because they want to be told A, B, C, D, and that can put you on a bit of pressure to know what to have to do with people in the earlier parts until they become a little bit more self-sufficient. But these are just some of the dynamics of dealing with different people across the globe and so on, behaviors. But fundamentally, being inclusive, getting the people around, sharing the problems, sharing the good times, the bad times, putting the team first, then aligning the team with purpose, values, and vision. Absolutely, it goes without saying that you have an end goal, deliver a product, a mission statement, why do you exist, and all this sort of stuff. And fundamentally, that everyone is sharing that same vision. So they have a sense of purpose and obviously meaningful work, but it gives them a direction. This is where we're trying to go, and this is where we want to be in 6 months' time, in a year's time, whatever. And building a high performance team, when you get to that level, the team is self-sustaining. They might just contact you as their manager and so on. For look, we have a little bit of an issue here, or could we try out something else? The team is well orchestrated, and I often use that as an example. Orchestrated team performance. It's literally like an orchestra, as such. All different instruments, different sections, woodwind, brass, percussion, and so on. And if you ever heard an orchestra tuning up before they give a recital, you wouldn't sit there for hours listening to that. It's just all noise, clutter, and squeaks and crap like that. Then when the conductor comes out, there's dead silence, and then they all play a piece of music and they blend and they listen to one another and they listen to other sections, and the conductor is up at the top just gently bringing them along and say, you need to up the pace here, or you need to get a little bit louder here, and calm down. They already know this stuff themselves, but they just want to he's trying to get the best feel because he has an overall view of all the text or notes, music score, and also how the piece could have been played somewhere else. He might have conducted another orchestra, slightly different age group, maybe different numbers of instruments in some sections, and he said, I can get them to sound as good as this top end orchestra, or to sound better than this other orchestra, by just bringing them out a little bit more. And they know this themselves. They know that, yeah, he was good. He that was a really good recital or performance because we did this and we did that slightly different. We did the rehearsals and they brought out a little bit more from us, so we got it right. That's the level of that's the top level of the pyramid in terms of performance, when you're at that fine-tuning level of an organization or a team as such. And as you can see, then the obvious outcomes, then passionate employees, so they really enjoy doing what they're doing, and that in itself generates more, higher levels of motivation. But you actually start to begin to throw your heart and soul into doing what you're doing. And I've always said, if you're passionate about something, you go ahead and do it. You're doing it for yourself, but you're also doing it for your team, okay, if that's the case, and so on. Increase commitment. So you see it coming up along the basic levels of engagement. So basically you're coming in to do your job, right up to the thing that, uh, getting ready on Sunday night to tear out the door at 7 o'clock on Monday morning, kind of thing. Or if you're overly passionate, can't wait on on the Saturday afternoon, watching a bit of sport or whatever you're doing, and say, geez, I can't wait for Monday morning. No, that's probably taking it to an extreme, but that's the kind of levels. You're just totally buzzed about what you have to do. Again, I'll just flipping through this again. It kind of covers a number of the points that I've just made. A vision, there is no leader. So if things fail, if you have no one that guides you and helps you towards this. This is why the leader on the opposite side here, if you look on the side, they provide the pathway for you to be able to achieve the overall vision. And oftentimes you don't know what's around the corner. They may have an idea, or they have a mechanism to be able to help you to slow down or speed up around the corner as such. And all this, and it goes on like this, success, how to handle the success and failure. Obviously been around the block, and I've been very, very fortunate to have worked with some exceptional leaders, not just managers and function managers or project managers, but actual leaders, and not too many of them, I can tell you, literally just a handful. But they've stuck in my mind ever since, and what I've learned from them as well, and I'm brought on into other organizations or situations and so on. And there was one particular guy, and I'll name him. He was Terjur Nurmi. He was a Finn, and he was the overall project manager on that project that I was talking about in Germany. If I was to describe him physically, he was a double for Ronnie Drew out of the Dubliners. And I can tell you, he fucking drank like a fish. In fairness to me, he did. And each of the projects and each of the geographic locations you just have to go around to, they'd have their sub-project meetings and kickoffs and so on and so on. And he was on the trail, as we called it, going around to each of these. Essentially, he was in the horrors nearly for 6 weeks on the go, But the one thing I always remember about him, I mean, apart from he never got excited when there was an impending disaster. He never lost a head. Nor did he get overly excited when things started to go really well and we started ticking off all our functions and features and so on, and things were going exceptionally well. He was extremely balanced. Yeah, and now, again, allowing for the fact that if you've ever dealt with Finns, they're almost expressionless. Another chap I worked with, a Finnish guy, his name was Timo Hapakangas, and he had this facial expression which was expressionless. And as a nickname, I got on eventually. It took ages to get to kind of know him and have an interaction with him. We used to call him Happy Hapakangas, because you couldn't tell whether he's smiling, crying, laughing, or joking or anything like that. But one thing for sure, I said, I said to himself directly, we still keep in touch, 30 years later. I said, if you ever wanted to take up professional poker, give me a shout, because I'll stake you, because there is no way would any of the other poker players be able to read your face or any of your tells. So but again, that's their that would be a general kind of perception or understanding or trait of Finnish people as such. They can be quite bland as such. But these guys, but in this case, as a leader for Terjo, it was extremely important because it stabilized the rest of us. We knew that we weren't going to get the heads taken off us if something was going wrong, and we knew that we weren't going to be singled out and say, look how great Mark is, or how great Klaus is in Germany, and all this. There was none of that. Everyone was treated pretty much the same, but he supported. If any one of us were running into troubles, he came to our help and worked very, very hard for that, and that's how we got tremendous respect from all the other sub-project managers across Europe as such. And they say, should have nobility is in management, and so every action of a leader should be transparent, and that's critical, so that there's no game playing. Because if you play games with someone, you might get away with it once. You might be lucky and get away with it a second time. You won't get away with it a third time, and people will you'll just totally destroy any trust if you play any kind of games and try and manipulate situations, particularly if it's for your own good, trying to promote yourself and so on. So you must, as I said, you must work and succeed with integrity, and that's very important. So being open, honest, and transparent. Now, again, these are just some of the skills here, but of the important ones here, okay, always we're looking at complex problem solving, no matter what entity we're in. I mean, you're looking at solving a complex problem, product, people, resources, partners, the business model canvas. That can be considered to be a complex problem solving methodology, but you're going through something. The critical thinking is the real important one. This is my favorite area of it as such. And what we mean by that is that you're able to assimilate all the information as quickly as possible and make decisions. And that's one of the expected attributes of AIT students, that they're critical thinkers. Now, many other colleges probably have the same idea as such, and so on. But really, what does it mean is that you're able to see things from many different perspectives. Look at it from the top, bottom, side, down onto it, different angles, walk away, come back, and think about it. It's the way you try to fill the gaps to get a total understanding. That's critical thinking, how you think about things, that you're not just one directional. I'm only thinking from the cost perspective. If you're looking at and if you're an accountant inside a firm, we're going to save money, we'll lay people off. Why? Because it saves money on the bottom line. You're ignoring that those people are going to be impacted. They may have mortgages, kids at school, blah blah blah, supporting people, others, and so on. They may be the only breadwinner in the house, and so on. Nevertheless, I see we need to save money. We cut people. That's not humane, to say the least. But if you were now an accountant and you worked in HR and you worked in operations and all these other areas, and you begin to see things from different perspectives and what it means to different people, their job and so on, then you'd be how to say, less ruthless in making cuts and so on. And if HR would say, well, apart from the person impact, how are we going to replace these people when the things turn up again, and we want to be able to we need to upskill or train or bring on people when business picks up and so on, and so on and so on. But critical thinking becomes extremely important. And again, you see there, people management is well up there. What else? Yes, emotional intelligence. And God knows you've done the psychometric test. And it's really powerful. And it doesn't even register in 2015, 2020. It's been, now it's been around for the better part of 10 years. It's been gaining momentum as a topic. And in actual fact, you can get all these reports up in the top corner here. You can see this World Economic Forum. It's a great resource for data and reports and trends and so on and so forth. And it's all free stuff. But if you look down here on these lists here, judgment and decision making has moved up, and that kind of goes hand in hand with this emotional intelligence, because it enables us, if we're aware of our surroundings and we're aware of ourselves and other people and so on, it helps us to be able to make better judgments and better decisions and so on. Service oriented. The reason why it probably dropped is that. The reason I mentioned it is that we were there to support people. It's dropped because it's not as important, because people are far more functional, they're much better educated and are continually, so the levels of education have been increasing. Therefore, we don't have to do as much, to use the expression, hand-holding as such. We can trust people to do stuff more efficiently. And that kind of would have manifested itself a number of years ago when, for example, in the computer sciences, graduates coming out were taught about agile design as a technique to write code in small chunks and break it down. So they were getting a very practical project management lesson while in college, that if you take the big picture, the big program, and break it down into a small little manageable chunks, do this, test it, do this, test it, and so on. Your business model canvas, small increments. So people have been educated to take the total and make it uncomplicated, simple, get the job done, move on to the next, move on to the next, move on to the next. That way you don't need, and that happened in Nokia and Ericsson in the mid 2000s, and they started to remove a layer of managers because they weren't really needed. That level or that service was not needed, so they were reassigned obviously to other roles in the organization. And cognitive flexibility, that's actually a new one that's even come in here. So how quickly you can adjust, and that's why I mentioned agile, because it's the speed at which we adjust, and that kind of fits into this cognitive flexibility, how quickly we can take instances and information and knowledge and situations, and how quickly we can respond. Responsiveness, that's the kind of cognitive flexibility. Not so much make quick decisions, but making highly informed decisions and change direction and respond, because there are so many exterior impacts on your business and on your team and on your project, that you have to be extremely quick to be able to spot what's happening coming down the road, and what's happening with competitors, what's happening with other teams, what's happening within your own organization that could impact you, and so on and so forth, and try to mitigate those impacts to keep your team and your function or your project focused and on heading in the right direction. Now, this one, I know this is even blurred on my screen. It's just the way I captured this advice, but it's interesting, and it kind of kicks you guys in the butt, unfortunately. Well, all undergraduates, and if I'll read it out. Beware, your degree is not a proxy for your ability to do any job. The world only cares about and pays off on what you can do with what you know, and it doesn't care how you learned it. So in an age where innovation is increasingly a group endeavor, it also cares about a lot of soft skills: leadership, humility, collaboration, adaptability, and loving to learn, and of course relearn. This will be true no matter where you go to work. I was coming from this guy, Laszlo Bock from Google, and it looks like oh yeah, that's all very nice, wishy-washy and all that sort of stuff. In reality, a degree has maybe 6 months currency. So you graduate in October, you have about 6 months to make it worth your while until the next graduates come out, give or take, because things move so quickly. Many years ago, a degree would last you, if you in the 60s and 70s, geez, you go to the top of an organization with a degree because there's so few of them. Now there's so many, and a master's might give you maybe a year of currency. And I know you're saying, geez, after spending 3 years and I only get 6 months or maybe maximum a year out of my degree. It's life. That's the way it has evolved, because so many people are coming out now that, as we say, it's easy to be a big fish in a small pond as opposed to a small fish in a big pond. You become less noticeable. And that's what happens inside an industry, in companies. And none more so than when I have between, I don't know what I told you, but personal insight. I've been divorced and remarried. As a consequence, I have 7 children, 4 step, 3 of my own. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 grandchildren. Do you know the program Modern Family? Yeah, they're only trotting after us. I'm deadly serious. They're only trotting after us in terms of all the dynamics, the ethnicities, the sexual orientations, the whole freaking lot, religions. They're only trotting after us. So I can speak with a relative authority on these things. But the point about it is that in this context of what I'm saying here in terms of applicants, yeah, it's not nice to hear that, yeah, my degree after spending 3 years or 4 years on an honours degree, that it's only worth maybe 6 to 9 months and so on. These people, all these kids and stepkids and so on, they've all worked in different environments, different types of companies and so on. And they've all been telling me, and their friends who oftentimes I meet up with them and so on, and to keep in touch with what's actually happening, because they're all in their early 30s now. But of course, since they're in their mid 20s and early to mid 20s, we keep in touch, and they're still, scattered to the four corners. Well, actually, no, they're all here in Ireland, as it happens, back again, but working for different types of industries, companies, large, small, and self-employed, blah, blah, blah. But the point is that it's really interesting. The big employers, the Googles, Facebooks, LinkedIn, financial services, all these companies, you get in the door, they want to train you in their ways. And they have all these internal programs And oftentimes, when you move from one company to the next, what they're looking at is, what did you learn at Google? Um, did you go on these courses in Google? And while you were in LinkedIn, what professional development? And they're actually, a lot of employees are finding more reward in the professional development that they're getting in those companies than just the promotions and the monies and all that sort of stuff. That's all secondary. It's how much they can get on their belt. Hence, you have this continuous learning, lifelong learning. It's a reality. It's a state of life now, even more so than it was when I would have been back there. We worked in companies back in the day, and there were almost jobs for life. Things changed, but there's no such thing as a job for life. And there's also a very valid stat that, on average, a working professional over their 40 odd years working lifespan, they will change their careers at least 3 times. I mean, when I talk about careers, I'm talking about total changes. I mean, I didn't start out to be a lecturer. I started out in accountancy, for crying out loud. Then into software engineering, a couple of other bits and pieces, and now into lecturing. So these are totally different careers. There are linkages, clearly, but they were certainly totally. And so you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what you're going to like and dislike. And I thought I wanted to be an accountant, and I took it so far and said, I'm getting bored of this stuff. And I had, I took brave decisions and said, this isn't, I'll try something else. And I like this. I started to become passionate about computing and programming and all that sort of stuff. And I did a spell in that, and I said, yeah, I learned a little bit of that, and so on, so on, so on. But that will be pretty much the roadmap for yourselves. You will find areas that you're passionate and go off in a total tangent altogether, and your degree essentially becomes redundant, but not insofar as maybe the content, maybe some of the subject matter is irrelevant. But the important thing is that for companies, they know with a degree that you're able to learn, and that's the point, really. When we were in Ericsson in the 80s, 90s, we were hiring graduates in from college. They weren't all computer scientists. They weren't all electronic engineers. They might have made up maybe half of the graduates coming in, and we'd take in, anywhere between 20 and 30 every quarter or every 6 months when we're growing at a rapid rate. We had zoologists, we had botanists, we had a whole range of physicists, music, languages, history. We had a couple of the arts. All, but it wasn't. It was the fact that they were in the learning frame of mind. So we were able to say, right, good. We know you're able to learn, and you've done well. You've proved it. You passed your exams. You're graduated. And in one or two instances, they didn't graduate, so we gave them extra time to go do the repeats, and then came in. We had already made job offers to a lot of people before they, on the basis that they were going to pass their degrees. And they came into us and they went on 16 weeks of a training course to teach them how to program in our particular languages and so on. So we knew that they had the skills to learn. So we were able to teach them, and that's how we progressed. A lot of them went on to greater things and so on. So that's the real point about that. And this thing. Now, this is a throwaway graph again. Think outside the box. What box? There is no box, and all that sort of stuff. That's just, it's all part of the show. Here's an interesting one for you, though. The happiness index. Where do you, now? This is where the kind of heart goes out to you guys, because really you're in this end. Look what's going to happen to you in terms of your happiness index. And then if you're like me up here, yippee, happy days, and I'm only halfway there. It's going to get better and better. Then it's all downhill then after that. But there's 6 feet under, strangely. But that's the life cycle we go through, and it affects us. What happens? Obviously, you're getting into your career. You're trying to make a name for yourself, and this has been postponed. That has actually shifted slightly more over in this direction, slightly more, and this has become a little bit more acute. If you're to take the same stat, probably this year or last year, you'd find that this is going on a little bit more and then becoming more acute, and then going back up again. And the reason being is that people are deferring the long-term relationships and marriage and all that stuff. Those areas of life are changing, and then of course children, and and the numbers of children and people wanting to commit and so on, and so on, and our commitments to our providing for family and so on. So we begin to take a back seat to all of those around us and so on. So our, generally speaking, our happiness, and then as the kids grow up and start to move out and so on, you're left with more me time, and for you and your partner or whatever it is and so on. So we begin to feel a little bit happier. You know what to say about grandchildren? They're lovely, but you can give them back. Okay. But this is, but more importantly, on a professional side of things, you're coming out of college, you're full of life, full of energy, and you're going in, you're throwing your heart and your soul into work, and you're hoping to succeed, and you will, you get your promotions and so on. It doesn't represent it here. But eventually, once you, generally speaking, hit around your mid-30s and so on, you've put all the effort in. Now other things in your life start to take priority. So however far you get up the corporate ladder, so to speak, that may be as far as you might be going. You might climb a little bit further. Sometimes it takes a bit of a lull, and as you have less commitments, it begins to take off again later on. For that reason, because you have gotten over the worst, you've gotten your kids through primary school, maybe secondary school, and maybe worse again, gotten them through college. Therefore, you can now, worry's over, they're self-sufficient. Now you have less reliance on you. Therefore, professionally, you can commit yourself again. And sometimes people change their careers at that stage, because now they've been unshackled from the sprogs, and they can move on with their careers, so to speak. But nevertheless, that's generally speaking how it looks. Now have a look at this one here. It doesn't tell you an awful lot, really. But it's the next slide that's really important. So, I'm no longer accepting the things I cannot change. I am changing the things I cannot accept. Knock yourself out, woman. But here's what it really drives us home to us. Opinion is really the lowest form of human knowledge. Why? Because it's an opinion. It's your own opinion. But it needs to be substantiated. You need to discuss, debate, and sometimes maybe argue, such that there's a shared understanding. On its own, that placard with your woman meant absolutely nothing. So what? It's your opinion. It's not my opinion. Blah, blah, blah. So it requires no accountability, no understanding. So the highest form of knowledge is empathy. Understanding what the other person is trying to say. Convincing them of what you're saying, but seeing their point of view, and so on. That's really why we will come on now to emotional intelligence. I'm going to skip through this. This is just kind of using the two-way system. If you want to get creative innovation down here, these are all the things you need to think about, digital stuff and so on. So you can read that yourselves. It's pretty straightforward. Identity and well-being, digital footprint, online identity, social networks, and so on, if you want to who you are and you want to create a presence for yourself. Anyway, so what's leadership? The difference between leaders and managers. This is what we'll start wrapping up on now, and I'll move at pace and get you out in the next 20 minutes. And then substitutes. I'll defocus on these substitutes for leaders. That's just, in my opinion, academic speak for all other stuff. You really have managers and leaders. And if you look at this here, there's these two, this kind of a Venn diagram for all intents and purposes. You have managers and you have leaders. Managers do things right, status quo, don't want to change things. They're short term. Where are we at now? What happens now? Blah, blah, blah. Are there issues? They say everything is a means, and they're builders and problem solving. So it's like the distasteful side of leadership. And that's the wrong word. I'm being a bit harsh on managers. they're fine. Certain instances, you have to be able to manage people, get them to do A, B, C, D, because you need to give them a bit of a kickstart and, carrot and stick and so on. And you might have to default to that role. But on the other side, you have leaders, they do the right thing. They're always open to change. They see the long term and they convince you this, hence the communication. So the CDNs, the means, in other words, I would have had chats with my heads of department, over the years, and I say I'm doing this and I'm doing that, and this is why I'm doing this and that, and they said, they got to a point, go ahead, do that as long as it's legal, which is a kind of a joke we used to have about the way we do things, and I ended up doing a course in UCD on entrepreneurial education. Why? Because I needed to have a badge to say that what I do inside in the class is legitimate and that it bucks the system. And I will behave and interact with students in my own way, unique or otherwise, that distinguishes me from other lecturers and the way we do things, to try and keep a level of engagement and benefit the students as such. And so the way I go about certain things might be a little bit unorthodox or different and so on, but the end result should be essentially the same, or I see a different type of end result that I'm bringing you on this journey. So we put all the bits and pieces in place, as leaders, the architects, as opposed to going in and building block by block. We provide the frameworks, the mechanisms, and here's the overall picture. Now you guys go off and do it, and we'll support you whenever you need. And then being inspiring and motivating and so on to create the level of enthusiasm to drive employees or students up to that level that they're passionate and enjoy doing what they're doing. Okay, so they're the fundamentals. And there is an old saying that every leader is a manager, but not every manager is a leader, and it's so bloody true. You can do all this stuff, everything by the book. Here's the process. Don't deviate from the process. If you do, we're in trouble, and this, that, and the other thing. Whereas a leader would say, okay, you hadn't followed the process. What did you learn from that? Can we adapt that in the rest of the organization? Is it more efficient, better, less costly, so on? So what are the benefits? So even though you might break the original process, you might have evolved a new process or a new way of doing things, not just to be different, but because you understand it and you have something to contribute, hence the inclusion and the involvement and respect for your employees as such. And this guy, Warren Bennis, is another one of these well-known American authors on leadership and management. And he said, American organizations, and he's right, in many other countries and developed countries, are underled and overmanaged. They do not pay enough attention to doing the right thing, while they pay too much attention to doing things right. Okay. So again, it's and that can come out, and if and you'd get the sense of that when you're talking about, for example, if you watch any of the performance of American companies, and if you're looking at the Bloomberg or any of these stations where they're talking about the quarter, and you see all the ticker tapes running across on performance of stocks, and so everything is driven by the pure financial level and the shares and the share value and so on. So pure metrics. So the narrowness of the metrics are forcing people. So if a company isn't performing, it gets hammered, and as a result that has a trickle effect on the company. People don't start selling the share, company value comes down, everyone gets their ass kicked and so on and so forth. And if you don't perform, you're out the side of the road. So American companies can be particularly ruthless like that, which is unfortunate. But you come over here towards Europe, and there's a lot more of the humane approach, or human resource approach, or whatever you want to call it, but definitely more people focus on it and less on the pure. Of course we have to achieve profit and hit our targets and so on, but whereas not and we have legislation as well that protects employees, more importantly, but we shouldn't have to default to that. It should be inbuilt into the culture and nature of the organization to look after the people and look after them. The rest will fall in place. Pure American organizations don't look at it that way. One of my other favorite diagrams are slides is this, and I did mention this to you before, I believe, but having the 3 M's, having your own personal mission statement, choosing a mentor, and, as I say, ethics. Stand in front of the mirror, and how do you rate yourself. And that's doing the right thing. Now let's just briefly go through those. But you have to have a sense, why am I doing what I'm doing? Where do I want to be? That your own, literally your own mission statement. Why do you exist? And that's for you to be able to answer. Why am I doing this degree? Why do I want to do this degree? Where do I see myself in 5 years time, to use the dreaded HR question at an interview? Bullshit. But yeah, why am I doing this? Why am I doing what I'm doing? And you have to make sense of that for yourself. Now, take care, it says here, in choosing a mentor. You don't identify one person. You don't say, I want to be like Obama, or I want to be like Conor McGregor, as a mentor. Or you don't pick one. You don't. It's not that kind of mentor. I would strongly warn you on that. What you're looking at is, what do you recognize in other people's? What qualities and characteristics can say, geez, yeah, he's good or she's good at that, and I like the way he did this and I like the way she did that. And you look at those and you take them in and you make them your own. Never try and copy. Because the minute you try to copy somebody, other people say, sure, look, he's only trying to be like Obama, and he's trying to be like McGregor, and or he's trying to be like Michael O'Leary, he's just a copycat and so on. People see through it like tissue paper. Look at the qualities and make them your own. If for example, Steve Jobs was a brilliant presenter when he launched products and so on and so forth. It's just the way he did it. But he practiced, and he practiced bloody hard before he went out onto I'd say a global stage, because he had all the international press there when they were making product launches. So he knew how to manage people and manage the situation, and how to feed to the waiting press and so on with new products and so on. So he was tremendous on stage. Some people are really, really good at that. And you might look at it and say, well, maybe if I do the same thing as Steve Jobs and do it exactly like him, it'll work. That's the point I'm making. Don't. Just because Steve Jobs wore a round neck and black jeans and so on and so forth, you don't go out and do the same, because you might have a full head of hair. He didn't, and it wouldn't look the same. There was Jonas Reader Straley, and what was the other guy's name? God, I can't think of the second guy. There were two guys, they were Swedish guys, they wrote a book called Funky Business around the early 2000s, and they had a follow-up book on it. But they went on the lecture circuit, and they were just gas characters, They both shaved their heads. They both wore glasses. They both wore black polo neck t-shirts, tops, black Levi jeans, and Doc Martens. They were almost identical, but they weren't. But they didn't do that because they were copying one another. They were creating their own unique kind of brand, and they were trying to sell this book, Funky Business. In other words, how to do things different in business and so on. It was quite good, a good book at its time. It's probably a little bit faddist, or a bit of a fad at the time. So yeah, be careful who. Now the mentors could be anyone. They could be your own brother or sister, older or younger, because the way they committed to doing a particular job, and say, I like the way they attack that, or the way they're playing a particular sport, the amount of effort they're putting into succeed in that sport. You might say, this is good, I'd like to be doing that as well, and so on and so on. So look at those in terms of the mentor, the mission, and the final one then on this one is the ethical performance. How do you know you've been performed ethical? And really, this is and genuine, at night, that you can go to sleep having asked yourself, the decisions and actions I've made and taken during today, can I sleep with them? Are they sitting with me comfortably? Am I anyway uneasy about things? Now, we all have certain levels, but those levels become our personality. Some might say, to hell with so and so and so on. Others might say, no, I think I should do this and I should do that. Different levels. Fundamentally, that you have a clear conscience, essentially. That's all it is. And you have to assess that, and you have to be able to gauge yourself what might be acceptable to you might not be acceptable to somebody else. But your emotional intelligence will be able to pick up on that and what the different levels, and you'll find some level of comfort yourself in your decisions and actions. And that's fundamentally what this comes down to. And certain to wrap up here, and I'll ignore this one, leaderships and leadership traits. This is what I wanted to get to. Again, the final slide. Technically it is. But again, I told you that there was going to be two of these circles, pie charts, or whatever you want to call it, showing leadership traits. This is undoubtedly my favorite one of all times. It's going back a number of years, but they haven't changed. And if you look around there, you saw this: emotional stability, awareness, self-confidence, cognitive ability, knowledge of the business, honesty and see, they're all coming true, even from the World Economic Forum report, from the earlier diagrams from 2015, from 2018, 2020 visions, and all this. This thing is 16 or 17 years old from memory, at least, maybe a bit older. The same old. But and the fundamentals, if you start at 12 o'clock and start to work around this clock, honesty and integrity, you have to have that fundamentally. Self-confidence. Now, again, be very careful on self-confidence. There's a fine line between confidence and arrogance, and you daren't cross it. But you've got to be able to judge that. And some people can be quite cocky, and that would be bordering on arrogance, and that pisses people off. But a level of self-confidence and assuredness, and to be able to move and step forward, but being aware that when people think you're crossing the line. That's the trick in it. When you're being overly confident, and people, you'll be able to pick up on the signals and say, he's pushy, and he's, who does he think he is, and kind of stuff. So you need to be able to temper that and pull it back. And this is where, remember I mentioned Terje Nurmi and emotional stability, that you're not running around looking for heads to roll when something goes wrong, or that you're not coming in, in foul form because the kids spilled your coffee all over your computer that morning and you're taking it out on everybody else, or when things are going great, that you're running around giving high fives up and down the corridor and all that sort of crap, that kind of, so that there's a level, so people know how you're going to react. You're kind of predictable. And that's important. So, and in terms of emotional stability, because people need that assuredness when you're on a long-term journey, bringing a product to market, or introducing a new product, or bringing a company or a team or a project from start to finish. They want to know that there's someone there. It's almost like parenthood, that you know yourselves, that there's someone that you can talk to in your family and that kind of thing. But for you, that you have that level of comfort, and you exude that, you show that, and people will have comfort in knowing that you're emotionally stable, and therefore our future, our development, our professional development is in good hands, because we have Mark there to show us how to get there. Cognitive ability, how quickly you're switched on to things, being aware of things around you, how quickly you pick up on situations, verbal, non-verbal, how you can anticipate situations, mitigate risk, and so on, and and that's really the fact that you're able to take in so many different things coming from so many different aspects in work and so on, and make sense of them. That's your cognitive ability. It's not the fact that you have a master's degree or a PhD bullshit at all. It's how quickly you can respond to. Now, knowledge of the business, and this can be a speed bump. Going from one company to the next, for example. I know project management. I've worked in project management, for example, in telecoms and IT. Does that make me? Does that mean that I could run a project to build a new bridge or develop a shopping center? Technically, I have the skills. I know about project management and so on, but I don't have the knowledge of those industries. So if I was to be overconfident from the other side and say, oh yeah, I can go in and build this new bridge for you because I know project management, you can guarantee I'd be falling flat in my face, and the bridge would probably fall down as well. But knowing the business you're in, and sometimes you might be missing stuff in the business, or you're being promoted and taking on more responsibility. Make it your business to get to know all the nuts and bolts of the business, the product, and so on and so forth, so that at least people will see that you've taken an interest in it and that you understand. So when they come with problems, you understand. That's why Willie Walsh, for example, when he was CEO of Aer Lingus and then moved on to British Airways and now to what they call the crowd, I can't think, the overall owners of Iberia, Aer Lingus, and British Airways and thingy. He trained as a pilot. He worked his way through the organization, so he understood everything. But he never goes off and shows, "Hey, I understand everything and I know everything about your radar system." He absolutely does, but he doesn't go in and slam it down people's faces and such. It makes it more effective, and he takes responsibility for his actions. The drive part of it is you do need to have a level of ambition, so to speak, and that you have the speed and the motivation, I suppose, to want to lead, and it means stamina, and oftentimes that means literally being physically fit, because you're putting in long hours, you're going from one part of the organization to the next, and you have a lot more on your plate, you have a lot more mentally to contend with, and to be able to contend with the cognitive ability and emotional stability and knowing all the things that are going on, how quickly that can be very tiring. So you do need to be at least physically fit to be able to have that drive. It goes hand in hand. The number of guys that I've seen promoted up through organizations and they go out jogging and running marathons and totally transforming themselves just so as they could stay fit to be able to do their job more effectively. The last one is extremely important. You can have all of these other points around here in this. You can have all of those other points. You know what I'm talking about. But if you don't want to lead, what's the point? What's the point in pushing yourself? And if you're being asked to lead something and say, yeah, you're Mark, you're damn good at this, you know the stuff, you know the business, you're totally switched on, stable, you're confident in doing what you're doing, will you take the team forward? No. Some people just don't want to. Some people are content to be in the background, to be a team player as opposed to being the team leader. So you have to have that desire to want to take on those additional, should we say, responsibilities as such. Some people succeed in it. Some people actually thrive when they get in there and say, this isn't as bad as I thought it was. But you have to be able to prepare to let go of some of the stuff that you might enjoy doing because you're taking on these new aspects of your work and your professional development, and they're extremely important. So that's the final point, your desire to lead. What's the last one then? Yeah, this is just a throwaway. That's actually a picture I have. It's a ceramic thing here. So what matters most is how you see yourself, and it absolutely does. You do have to start with yourself before you start impacting on others and so on. And it's important that you're honest with yourself. That's one of the reasons, or this whole slide deck and so on that I've just shown are all contributory or reasons as to why we get you to do these psychometric tests, so you do have a really good understanding of yourself in these areas, because we all have room for improvement at various stages in our careers and so on and so on. And it's important that when you're comfortable with yourself, when you have that emotional stability and your cognitive awareness and your emotional intelligence and all this sort of stuff, and you have that level of confidence about yourself, then you don't need to put on a show. You don't need to bullshit people left, right, and center, or create this alter ego of yourself that isn't really you. Because here's the fun part, or the kick in it: people can see through it. No matter what image you try to create, they can see through it. Because and it takes energy to try and create this other persona of who you'd like people to think you are, and fundamentally that takes energy. Don't. Just get back into your shoes, understand who you are, and be comfortable with it, and you'll be surprised when you say, here I am, warts and all, and this is the real me. Then you actually get say, yeah, it's a weight off my shoulders, now we can build from here. Hence, you'll have the integrity and trust and so on and so forth. All these begin to fall in place afterwards. But if you try to create something that you actually aren't, as I said, it'll burn up your emotional energy and mental energy trying to create this. It'll confuse people. They'll find it difficult to trust you and respect you because they don't. There's something about him I don't understand, or I don't get, or I don't trust, and so on and so forth. Remove all of that, and as I say, go naked on the emotions and trust people to be able to respond to you the same way. I don't know about you folks, but I particularly enjoy that, as it's quite passionate and it's good crack and it's extremely practical and all that sort of stuff. Any questions, comments, insults, jokes? No? Okay, folks, I'm going to let you go on that. And I hope you enjoyed this. I'll obviously I have it recorded. I'll splice it and dice it. Well, I won't do too much dicing of it, and put it up on YouTube for you. And yeah, take the key points out of it as much as you wish after that. And we'll see you next week, please God. Okay. So have a good weekend, folks. Take it easy.
All right. Thanks, Mark.
You're welcome.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye bye. Bye bye.
Recording stopped.